Hi everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Cioffi on this Tuesday, July 24th, 2018, coming up on about 5 minutes before 6 o'clock Eastern Time, and we've got some interesting weather going on this evening. I'm going to start first with, usually I don't start with the Southwest and Southern California, but I'm thinking, why not? Because it is hot. Just showing you areas where we have excessive heat issues throughout the Southwest. You can see a lot of numbers in the 115, 114, 116, 118, 120 reading. I believe that I got to look at it on the bigger map. That is in Blythe, California. In Southern California. Palm Springs, I actually have some observations there, but I just want to run up the coast. In Los Angeles, it's not as harsh. You've got 90s, upper 90s as you go inland, but it's in the 80s along the immediate coast, so there's probably a little bit of sea breeze action going on. But go into inland towards Santa Clara, Lancaster, we're talking 108, Ontario at 106, Riverside at 104, and then we have up the coast, you still have more heat, although it's not technically excessive, with temperatures in the upper 90s to around 100 degrees as we move our way up through Central California. It's actually pretty warm in San Francisco, unless you go look at the temperature difference. You go right on the coast with readings in the upper 50s and low 60s, and then you just basically drive a handful of miles inland, and you're talking readings that are in the upper 80s and lower 90s. 91 at Fairfield, Napa at 79, Santa Rosa at 84, a little further north up the coast. But you can see the huge temperature difference. This is kind of like the Northeast in the springtime in a sense, because the ocean water temperatures here are in the low 50s, and they really seldom get above that. So the specific temperature, and this is at Palm Springs at Jacqueline Cochran Regional Airport, 120 degrees with a dew point of 47 and a humidity of 9%. So the heat index is actually 6 degrees lower. It feels like 114, okay, if you want to call that relief. And at Palm Springs Regional Airport, we're looking at 118 with a dew point of 48 and a relative humidity of 10%. So the heat index there is 113. So amazing how hot it gets down there. Now, the other issue I want to point out, and I'm going to bring up the one of the local radars here out of central Pennsylvania, because this area over the last 3 days has gotten anywhere from 2 to as much as 5 to 6 inches of rain in some places north of Harrisburg, and we're still getting, and have gotten all day long, waves of downpours coming up from the south, and we're seeing some now working their way northward toward Williamsport, and actually going near Binghamton and going just west of Scranton. Much of the activity has basically been concentrated here. The axis of the heavy rains has not really made any kind of decided eastward shift at the moment. So as a result, you're just seeing the same spot getting hit over and over again. And this area got hit fairly hard with rain from Saturday and Saturday night's low that moved up the coast. But here's the Weather Prediction Center's rainfall forecast for the next 7 days. Now, remember, these areas, again, have already gotten anywhere from 2 to as much as 6 inches. Look for another 2 to 5 inches to fall through much of Pennsylvania and into upstate New York. The drought areas up in north central New York are going to benefit substantially from this. Also, some heavy rains going on in coastal North Carolina, and we actually see that on the regional radar, which I'll show you in just a second. Rains also to be on the high side in central and south Florida and across the southern plains, back over into the central Rockies, and of course very, very quiet along the west coast from south to north. The dry heat there in complete control with the big ridge position that they're sitting in. So let's go take a look at what's happening from the standpoint of the regional radar, and we'll bring that up to you. Now, here's the rain. You can see the rain that is over eastern Pennsylvania. But we also have this band of moderate to heavy rain from eastern Virginia down into eastern North Carolina. All of this is moving north-northwestward. The upper trough that is driving all this, if you remember back from yesterday, we were talking about how that upper trough is basically getting elongated and stretched out from north to south. Well, that is going to start to make a move and pivot to the east. So that will eventually shift this rain area out of Pennsylvania and move it eastward into New Jersey, the Hudson Valley, southern New England, and Long Island. We did see, by the way, an expansion of flash flood watches now covering all of the state of New Jersey except the southeast and the northeast part of the state. Haven't seen too much change elsewhere with regards to where we have watches up. And of course, there have been numerous flood warnings. In fact, I'm just going to find numerous flood warnings that we've seen today across a good chunk of the state of Pennsylvania, which is no surprise. But here is the map, the darker greens. That's all flash flood watches across much of the state of North Carolina, eastern and northeastern Virginia, almost all of the state of Maryland except the extreme west, and basically at least the eastern half of Pennsylvania into New Jersey and into the Catskills. The lighter greens and the bluish green, those are either flood advisories or flood warnings, and those are going to continue as we go through the rest of this evening. We have seen some occasional flash flood warnings that have been posted, and we're likely to see more of those later tonight and during the day on Wednesday, and also seeing them in areas further to the east. Meanwhile, we do have that excessive heat in the southwest and in southern California. Then it kind of weakens out to heat advisories as you move up the coast, but away from coastal locations. It really is more just inland, but it is inland. You are getting relief, by the way, if you are beach bound in Southern California. Okay, so let's go from here and take a look at the weather models and see what's happening. And we're going to bring up our friendly neighborhood GFS here, and hopefully I got to go to the other window capture. There we go. And there it is. Okay, so let me just make this a little bit bigger for you guys so you can see. Excuse me. You can see the new GFS is actually running late tonight. It has just started. So we're just going to go back 6 hours to the old one. The west, of course, being in the heat box, the southwest, and then we've got the rain in the east. And here's our situation through Wednesday. More downpours into the east and still lingering into Thursday. There is some drier, cooler air coming into the Great Lakes and into the Ohio Valley. You can see that high pushes down, but it's not the most impressive push. And the problem is that the flow along the East Coast, even though this trough is weakening and getting kicked out, it's basically remaining from a southwest flow. So that's going to probably keep us in the chance for downpours going into the weekend. I think there's a chance that we could see some dry time for Saturday and for a good part of Sunday before we go back to more chances for downpours and thunderstorms early next week. You notice it's not a continuous rain, but this is what happens when you get into a tropical weather pattern and a tropical flow. and it's very persistent. We've been talking about the fact that the trough wants to just stay in the eastern part of the United States, and that is problematic. So here's how it looks when you look at it using the whole USA. Whoops, sorry about that. And move this down just a little bit so you can see the date and time running across the top of the screen there. And there's your trough in the east, starting from earlier today. It's already a shadow of its former self. Look at what it's gone from. This very large, strong upper low that was able to lift up that coastal low and turn it to the northwest, and now it's gotten elongated, and the trough the bottom of the trough has actually dropped down into the southeastern part of the United States. You've got another trough, another short wave that's swinging across from the northern plains into the western lakes. So that kicks that out. As it kicks it out to the northeast, we see that rain area in the east shifting further eastward, and then that trough kind of drops in, tries to bring the jet stream from Canada down a little further south. So this is why we're thinking that maybe there's a chance over the weekend that we might see a bit lowering, a bit of a lowering of the humidity in the east for a day or two. Meanwhile, the ridge in the west just kind of stays there in the west. And then part of that trough lifts out, and then another part drops in to the Great Lakes. And this one actually, in the last couple of runs, seems like this trough wants to drop a bit further to the west, but we still have this south-southwest flow here in the eastern part of the United States. The Bermuda high is kind of trying to build back westward, so we're still seeing this tropical flow of air coming into the east. And then eventually, another shortwave trough in the northwest flow tries to come down as we go through the latter part of the period. We still have a strong ridge out in the Atlantic, still have a strong ridge out in the west, and a little bit of weakness there along the east coast. Again, this is not a time where you want to see. This is not a time where you want to see a tropical system, because with the troughing in the east, these models are going to be doing their usual song and dance of variations from run to run in terms of where the troughs drop and what they ultimately wind up doing. So you got to be a little careful, obviously, in terms of specifics, especially after you go past, say, day 7 and day 8. When we look at the North Atlantic view over the next 84 hours, the only thing I did notice was that as we get into the month of August, it looks like a couple of tropical waves are going to try and move out at the very beginning of the month. The models don't seem to be doing anything with them, but it does look like there might be a little bit of wave action coming off. Now, we continue to have the issues that we've been speaking of with regards to the tropical Atlantic, the Saharan dust, which continues to be a problem. We'll bring up the latest satellite loop. And we also have a couple of upper lows in play here that are important. So if you take a look east of Florida, northeast of Puerto Rico, and just southeast of Bermuda, we do have this large upper low that is just churning out there. So conditions not really all that favorable for development as long as that upper low is out there. And looks like we've got some kind of upper low out in the eastern Atlantic for now, but we also can see some tropical waves moving offshore. I'm trying to see how that brownish haze of the Saharan dust is there, but it doesn't look as strong as it was several days ago. This could be maybe the beginnings of a general weakening of that trend for Saharan dust to keep coming in off the coast and moving across the tropical Atlantic. We'll see, but it is something we have to pay attention to, because if that dust is out there and you don't have a really moist environment, these tropical waves are going to have a real tough time getting going. And perhaps this is the reason why not only has it been impacting the weather in the tropical Atlantic, but I think it's probably had some impact in the tropical Pacific, which has been also very, very quiet these last couple of weeks during the period where the Atlantic fired up Hurricane Chris off the East Coast, the Pacific side has been very silent, and there have been a couple of waves that have looked like they were going to do something, but in the end, they really didn't do much of anything. So we'll just have to wait and see on this in the next 2 weeks. Going into August, of course, that's when you start to see tropical activity picking up in earnest, and doesn't always match up to the calendar. Sometimes there are delays, and we've had the occasional August where we haven't seen much of any tropical activity. So you can't really rule anything out. Kind of, I don't know, I got kind of mixed signals regarding this. I'm not 100% sure how this is going to go. Let me see if I can give a quick check. We could give a quick check to the water temperatures out in the Atlantic, and let's see. I'm going to bring up the anomalies. That's probably the most useful thing. So let's. I'll bring that up front and center now. So we'll look at the ocean water temperature anomalies in the Atlantic, and actually. Very interesting that you have a large area of the tropical Atlantic and the subtropical Atlantic now showing near or slightly below average temperatures. So the departures are basically 0 to 1 degree Celsius below average. And then you have near average temperatures just off the southeast coast into the Bahamas, and also into the Gulf of Mexico, and also in the Caribbean. So it's very interesting how the Atlantic has, the areas south of 30 degrees north now showing this sort of expanding area of below average temperatures, and yet just to the north of 30 degrees north to about 45 degrees north, we have what seems to be now an expanding area of above average ocean water temperatures. So that's a fairly interesting development. Now, the below average temperatures are only a little bit below average. They're not crazy below average. When we look at the actual ocean water temperatures out here, you want to look for the 26 degree Celsius line. That is where you can support a tropical storm. And it looks like we're talking basically along and south of 10 degrees north. North of 10 degrees north, the ocean water temperatures are between 24 and 26 degrees Celsius. That's kind of borderline for tropical storm formation. It certainly isn't warm enough to support any kind of major hurricane in that area. You have to go west of 55, I believe. That's 50. I'm sorry, west of 50 west, you start to get into the 26 Celsius water. And once you get west of 60, then you start to see that 28 degrees Celsius or higher water temperature. The Gulf of Mexico water temperatures are above 30. So overall, when we're talking and looking at the profile of the ocean water temperatures in the Atlantic, they're kind of average, maybe a little bit below as we saw with the anomalies, but not crazy below. We'll take a look back at this maybe a week from now and see what's changed. But sometimes it's you're better off not looking at these maps for a couple of weeks at a time and then coming back to them, and then you can see the changes kind of show up over a course of day to day. If you're looking at it every day, the changes are going to be slight. But over the course of the last couple of weeks, we have seen a bit of an interesting and significant change to the ocean water temperature profile out in the tropical Atlantic. So I'm going to come back to you guys now on the board. Excuse me. As we take a look, I want to get to some of your questions and comments. So good evening to everybody. Garrow Vestas, who hasn't been here for a while, I saw that in Pennsylvania by Hershey Park, 3.5 feet of water, and they've closed the park. That was all from the heavy rain and flash flooding. That is correct, and they did get additional rain there today. Do I think it'll hit the 90s again? It's going to start going down. Well, we've got plenty of time for 90s. We did that one day last week where we looked at the heat waves, at least for in and around New York City, and the longest heat waves that are on record are all heat waves that occurred toward the end of August and the beginning of September. So there's plenty of time for 90-degree highs for those of you who are really interested in it. David Allen on from the UK. Some parts of the UK haven't seen rainfall since late May, and wildfires are still burning, still very hot, and the southeast could reach 98. Could I look at the Europe? Okay, let's do that. We haven't done that in a while, so why don't we take a look at what's going on overseas? Okay, bring the map up to the top. We will go back to the GFS. We will bring up the map of Europe and take a look and start back from the beginning. In fact, you know what? Why don't we look at the actual temperatures? And all right, so this is for 18Z, which is 6 p.m. This evening, so midnight. So this is noon tomorrow. So we're looking at temperatures in the, at least from the GFS standpoint. I don't know what goes on in terms of the in-between time, because we have noon and the next time that we see here is 6 hours later. So you're probably going to hit the highs, obviously, in between that. But it's in the low 80s on Wednesday in southeastern England, and it's a little bit lower. You know, it looks like 60s across up in Scotland. And, oh, look at that. On Thursday, by noon, you're talking about temperatures near 90 in southeastern England. I'm sorry, 29 is not 90. 29 is mid-80s. I'm getting ahead of myself. 32 would be 90. And you're looking at temperatures, again, middle and upper 80s. So you know what? I guess when they get to the height of the day, although I'm not 100% familiar with the local climo effects, winds off the water, sea breezes, and everything else, probably 90-degree temperature, certainly not impossible. And it looks like we carry those warm temperatures into the weekend. It looks like a little moderation happens on Sunday and then into Monday. So why don't we take a look at what's happening on the maps and see what's playing out here. I think we'll go to the upper air. And, you know, you're on the edge here with this ridge that is sitting over Western Europe, over France and Germany. So you're trying, you know, looks going through next week. Big upper low finds its way to between Ireland and the coast of Greenland, and then that lifts up northwestward. I mean, it looks like you might at least get into a busier flow, so that would at least bring some weather fronts through here, through your area, going into the long range. I'll just, I'm kind of doing this on the fly here, folks, so you know, you have to bear with me because I didn't really give it a good. I haven't been looking lately, but here's Thursdays. You got a system that tries to bring in some showers. Doesn't look like anything excessive rain-wise until later in the weekend. Maybe a better chance when that low that's east of Ireland, west of Ireland, swings northward and northwestward, that it could bring an arm of showers across much of England and Scotland. But the southeastern part does get bypassed here. The trough axis is probably a bit too far to the west. So you're going to have to look for some bigger changes to occur in the longer term with regards to breaking the dry weather that you have. Maybe the excessively warm temperatures might take a break over time, but the dryness looks to hang on for a little while as far as the weather goes in England. Delvin, Maine and Nantucket, as well as far eastern Massachusetts, last 8 p.m. sunset, as Delvin is monitoring the shrinking of daylight across the northern hemisphere. The days are getting shorter. Before you know it, we'll be looking at Siberian snow cover. James CIP, hi back. James from Amityville on Long Island. ZUK, such improvement in the visual presentation. Thank you. Trying to do a little sharpening up with a few things and getting more comfortable with the technical program that I use to bring up maps. Edward Bowers, still raining in Lewisberry, Pennsylvania, heavy at times, small stream flooding. And you got more to work through tomorrow. In fact, the rainfall amounts by the models are generally for an additional 2 to 3 inches across parts of Pennsylvania, and then that area is going to extend up into New Jersey, where we have the flat, and up into north central New York. So another 2 to 3 inches on top of what some areas have already seen, which has been on the order of about half a foot. Andrew's doing fine. He's on vacation. Trying to get him to sync his schedule up so we can bring him on here, but every time we try, there seems to be an issue. But right now he's on vacay, so we'll have to wait till he gets back. Tam Lewis, nice to see you here. I haven't seen you up on the board in a while. Kathy Willis wants to know, her son wants to know, will we get a Cat 3 hurricane in North Carolina soon? Now, you know that's a question I can't really answer because I have no idea. I think we have to watch and wait and see how the next few weeks evolve with respect to the issues that we have and the issues that we're dealing with in the tropics. As we pointed out a little earlier, the Saharan dust, the upper lows that are out in the Atlantic. Look, it seems to me that there's a general rule. My buddy Dave Tolerus likes to use this rule that wherever you see the first storm develop during the hurricane season, that's usually where you wind up seeing the majority of storms for that particular season. Now, he's kind of excluding Alberto because Alberto occurred outside the traditional hurricane season, but he's looking at Hurricane Chris, which formed off the east coast of the United States. So it would suggest that maybe this would be more of an Atlantic-based type year as opposed to last year, where everything moved, had a strong westward component of motion. So it wound up being more of a year for the Caribbean and going into the Gulf of Mexico, so that this year may be more, or you'll have systems having more of a northward component of motion and find themselves off the southeast coast of the United States at some point. Now, whether that means something makes landfall or not remains to be seen, and it certainly doesn't mean that there will be no other hurricanes or tropical storms in the Gulf of Mexico or the Caribbean. It just means that maybe the majority of the activity may want to favor more the Atlantic side rather than areas to the west and to the south. We'll see. But got a long way to go. Let's see. I think that pretty much wraps it up. Not many, few questions here on the chat board, but not a lot. And I think I got to all of them. Priscilla Mayu, a wonder day with low humidity and light winds out of the north. Spent most of the day outside and getting some yard work done. One thing about the deep trough, for where it is, it did bring down drier air pretty far down in the south into the Gulf states. It's very unusual to see that as far south as we see it. I'm going to just going to check New Orleans. I'm just kind of curious in terms of what they are right now. All right, they're kind of typical here. 90 with a dew point of 72. Let me look at Alexandria. See, now there's the difference. This is quite a treat for you. I'm just looking at Alexandria's observation in central Louisiana. And I'm going to bring it up because it's not often that you see dew points like this. But here's the 5 o'clock Central Time observation in Alexandria, 93, which is hot, but the dew point is 60. So that comes out to a relative humidity of 33%. That is a nice change when you are in a climate where it's 90 degrees every day with dew points near 70 every single day in that tropical air. It is, you get used to it, but when that first day where the dew point drops down like we're seeing here down to 60, that is a nice feeling. So I'm glad for you, Patricia. Priscilla Mayu. I am very glad for you that you are enjoying those low dew points, because you know it's not going to last very long. Okay. So just want to make sure I got everybody on here. William Uber, and hi to you. I think I got, if I left anybody out, I'm sorry, but running out of time here. Okay, so thanks very much for everyone. You'll notice, you may have noticed that there's a link to Amazon and a link to Ebates on my under the descriptor of this live stream, and also if you're watching this from the video, if you use those links to shop on Amazon, or if you use Ebates. I'm a participant in the affiliate services program for Amazon and for Ebates, and it's a program designed to provide a means for this channel to earn fees from Amazon or from Ebates and their affiliated sites. So I really appreciate those of you who have done some of your shopping on Amazon, or if you've jumped aboard and signed up on Ebates so you can get some additional cash back. I really appreciate it greatly. Gets me a couple of extra cigars along the way. Tonight, as usual, the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Last night we wound up starting at about 8:50, given the other things that are going on. So we'll shoot for an 8:50 recording time on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, and you can watch it live on my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Cioffi, or on Joe Rayo's Facebook page, Joe Rayo Weather. Okay, folks, have a great evening. Be safe, and we will either see you later or we'll see you tomorrow.